Imagine this: you wake up one morning, open the news, and discover that a company most people had never heard of has become one of the most valuable businesses on Earth. Not Apple. Not Google. Not Microsoft. NVIDIA. A company that once struggled to survive, a company that came within months of running out of money, a company whose CEO believed there was only a 1% chance it would succeed. So how did a small graphics chip company become the engine powering the AI revolution? How did one risky decision made over 20 years ago create trillions of dollars in value? And what can entrepreneurs, investors, and dreamers learn from a company that refused to follow the crowd? Because this isn't just the story of a tech giant. It's the story of vision over comfort, patience over hype, and the unbelievable power of making the right bet before the rest of the world even knows the game has begun. Today, every major AI model, every self-driving car, every cutting-edge robotics company, and even the technology behind many of the world's biggest breakthroughs, depends, in one way or another, on NVIDIA. But success wasn't always guaranteed. In fact, during its early years, failure looked far more likely. This is the story of impossible odds, relentless belief, and one of the greatest business transformations in modern history. This is the rise of NVIDIA. Every legendary company has a beginning. Apple started in a garage. Amazon began in a small rented house. But NVIDIA started in a Denny's restaurant in San Jose, California. It was 1993. The personal computer industry was growing fast, but nobody knew what the future of computing would look like. Three engineers, Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Priam, shared one belief. Computers were about to become dramatically more powerful. Not because of faster CPUs, but because a new kind of processor would change everything. At the time, this idea sounded almost ridiculous. Most companies were focused on making better CPUs. Graphics chips were considered a niche product, useful mainly for gamers. Investors weren't interested. Experts weren't convinced. And the market didn't seem to care. But Jensen Huang saw something others didn't. He believed that one day, computers would need specialized processors capable of handling millions of calculations at the same time. Not just for games, but for problems too complex for traditional processors. It was a vision that was years, perhaps decades, ahead of its time. So the three engineers took the biggest risk of their lives. They left secure jobs. They invested everything they had. And they built a company around an idea the world wasn't asking for. They named it NVIDIA. But having a vision is one thing. Surviving long enough to prove it is another. The company's first years were brutal. Money disappeared faster than it came in. Competitors were everywhere. Every failed product brought them closer to bankruptcy. Years later, Jensen Huang admitted something astonishing. He said that if he had known how difficult the journey would be, he might never have started the company. That statement reveals an important truth. Success often looks obvious in hindsight. But while you're living it, it feels like uncertainty, doubt, and constant pressure. For NVIDIA, the biggest challenge wasn't becoming successful. It was simply staying alive long enough for the future to catch up with their vision. And soon, that future would test them in ways they never imagined. Most people believe that great companies rise in a straight line. The reality is far different. In NVIDIA's early years, success seemed almost impossible. The company's first major product, the NV1 graphics chip, was supposed to change everything. Instead, it became a painful lesson. The gaming industry was evolving rapidly, but NVIDIA had made a critical bet on a technology that the market didn't fully embrace. When major game developers and hardware partners chose different standards, the NV1 struggled to gain traction. Sales were disappointing. Cash was disappearing. Confidence was fading. Inside the company, every decision suddenly carried enormous weight. Payroll still had to be met. Engineers still had to be paid. But time was running out. Jensen Huang later revealed that NVIDIA had enough money left to survive for only a short period. The company wasn't thinking about becoming the world's biggest AI powerhouse. It was simply trying to stay alive. Many startups would have accepted defeat. Some would have blamed the market. Others would have abandoned their original vision. But Jensen Huang chose a different path. He made one of the hardest decisions any founder can make. Instead of defending a failed product, he admitted it had failed. The team went back to the drawing board. Every mistake was analyzed. Every assumption was questioned. Every engineer focused on building something dramatically better. It was a painful reset. But it revealed a principle that would define NVIDIA's culture for decades: never fall in love with your past success or your past failures. Fall in love with learning. That mindset led to a new project. A graphics processor designed around what developers actually wanted, not what NVIDIA hoped they would want. It was a massive gamble. If this product failed, NVIDIA might not get another chance. The company's future, and perhaps its very survival, depended on a single launch. Sometimes, history doesn't change because of luck. It changes because a small group of people refuses to quit when quitting seems like the most logical choice. For NVIDIA, that moment had arrived. And the next chip they built wouldn't just save the company, it would lay the foundation for one of the greatest technology empires the world has ever seen. In business, there are moments when everything depends on a single decision. For NVIDIA, that moment arrived in 1997. After the failure of the NV1, the company had no room left for another mistake. Every engineer knew it. Every investor knew it. And Jensen Huang knew it better than anyone. This time, NVIDIA wouldn't try to convince the market to change. Instead, it would build exactly what the market needed. The result was a new graphics chip called the Riva 128. Unlike its predecessor, the Riva 128 was fast, affordable, and, most importantly, compatible with the standards game developers were already using. It wasn't trying to reinvent the rules. It was solving real problems. When the chip launched, something extraordinary happened. Gamers loved it. PC manufacturers wanted it. Developers embraced it. For the first time, NVIDIA wasn't fighting for survival. It was fighting for growth. The success of the Riva 128 brought in the revenue the company desperately needed. More importantly, it restored something even more valuable than money: confidence. But Jensen Huang understood a dangerous truth. Success can be more dangerous than failure. Failure forces you to improve. Success tempts you to become comfortable. So instead of celebrating for too long, NVIDIA did something unusual. They invested aggressively in research and development. While competitors focused on winning today's market, NVIDIA was already preparing for tomorrow's. Just 2 years later, in 1999, the company introduced a product that would redefine the entire industry. It called it the Graphics Processing Unit, or GPU. At the time, most people saw it as a better graphics chip for video games. But Jensen Huang saw something much bigger. He believed the GPU wasn't just for drawing images on a screen. It was a completely new way of computing. A processor capable of handling thousands of calculations simultaneously, far more efficiently than a traditional CPU for certain types of work. The world wasn't ready to appreciate that vision. But NVIDIA didn't need the world to believe. It only needed time, because hidden inside that invention was the technology that would one day power artificial intelligence, scientific research, autonomous vehicles, and some of the most advanced supercomputers ever built. The greatest breakthroughs often don't look revolutionary when they are first introduced. Sometimes, they look like ordinary products with extraordinary potential. And NVIDIA had just created one of them. By the early 2000s, NVIDIA had finally achieved what most startups only dream about. It was profitable. Its GPUs were becoming the standard for PC gaming. Investors were happy. The company had every reason to protect what it had built. Most CEOs would have focused on selling more graphics cards. But Jensen Huang wasn't interested in building just another successful company. He wanted to build the future. And to do that, he was willing to make a decision that looked completely irrational. In 2006, NVIDIA introduced a platform called CUDA, short for Compute Unified Device Architecture. To most people, it sounded like another technical software release. But inside NVIDIA, it represented something much bigger. CUDA allowed developers to use NVIDIA's GPUs for far more than graphics. Instead of rendering video games, GPUs could now solve complex mathematical problems, process enormous amounts of data, and accelerate scientific research. It was a revolutionary idea. The problem? Almost nobody cared. There was no AI boom. No ChatGPT. No massive data centers racing to buy GPUs. Many investors questioned why NVIDIA was spending so much money on a technology with no obvious market. For years, CUDA generated little excitement. The company invested billions of dollars in research, developer tools, and software ecosystems without knowing when, or even if, the investment would pay off. From the outside, it looked like NVIDIA was wasting time and money. But Jensen Huang understood something that many businesses ignore. The biggest opportunities are often invisible in the present. If you only invest in what is already popular, you'll always arrive too late. Real innovation requires building for a future that doesn't exist yet. So while the rest of the tech industry was competing for today's profits, NVIDIA was quietly preparing for tomorrow's revolution. Year after year, the company continued improving CUDA. They supported universities, worked with scientists, partnered with researchers. And slowly, almost unnoticed, thousands of developers began building their work around NVIDIA's platform. The ecosystem grew. Not because of hype, but because it solved real problems. Then, something unexpected happened. Researchers working on a field called deep learning discovered that NVIDIA's GPUs could train artificial intelligence models dramatically faster than traditional CPUs. What had been designed for graphics was suddenly becoming the engine of AI. The world had finally caught up to the vision Jensen Huang had seen years earlier. And the gamble that once looked foolish was about to become one of the greatest strategic decisions in business history. For nearly 2 decades, NVIDIA had been preparing for a future that most people couldn't even imagine. Then, the future arrived. Artificial intelligence exploded. Breakthroughs in deep learning, large language models, robotics, autonomous vehicles, drug discovery, and scientific computing created an insatiable demand for computing power. And there was only one company truly ready for it. NVIDIA. Its GPUs, once built to make video games look better, had become the brains behind the AI revolution. Companies around the world rushed to build smarter AI systems. Researchers needed more computing power. Cloud providers raced to expand their data centers. Tech giants invested billions of dollars. And almost all of them needed NVIDIA's hardware. The company that once struggled to make payroll now found itself at the center of one of the biggest technological revolutions in human history. Its revenue surged. Its profits reached record highs. Its market value climbed into the trillions of dollars, making NVIDIA one of the most valuable companies in the world. But if you ask Jensen Huang what created this success, the answer isn't luck. It isn't timing. And it certainly isn't magic. It's decades of relentless preparation. While others chased quarterly profits, NVIDIA invested in technologies that wouldn't pay off for years. While competitors focused on selling products, NVIDIA built an ecosystem that developers could trust. And while the world laughed at impossible ideas, NVIDIA kept building. This story isn't really about computer chips. It's about a mindset. A reminder that the biggest rewards often come to those willing to think beyond the present. Every entrepreneur will face rejection. Every creator will experience failure. Every dreamer will be told their vision is unrealistic. The question is, will you stop because the world doesn't believe in your idea? Or will you keep building until the world has no choice but to notice? Because history has a strange habit of rewarding the people who prepare long before opportunity arrives. NVIDIA didn't become extraordinary overnight. It became extraordinary through thousands of ordinary days filled with discipline, learning, and unwavering belief. The next billion-dollar idea, the next industry-changing company, the next impossible dream, may already exist today. The only difference is that, just like NVIDIA in 1993, almost nobody believes in it yet. So here's one question for you: what future are you building today that the rest of the world won't understand until tomorrow? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Balls of Fire, where we uncover the strategies, psychology, and untold journeys behind the world's greatest businesses. Because success leaves clues, and together we'll find them.